The first day of October was as sunny as expected, and nothing dread had occurred overnight. Lucius and Magnus both greeted the day in better moods than in last night's tense patrolling. Perhaps Magnus had spent too long conversing with Melbourne's creatures, however. He'd fallen easily into his other shape. Lucius was beginning to worry about how often Magnus did this now, and how often he forgot to hide parts of his rat self when he was on 2 legs again. He was on 4 legs now, sitting on Lucius's shoulder and squeaking at the window. Lucius's grandfather had once conversed with Rat Magnus, and when Lucius was an infant, the enchanted rat would curl beside his soft baby face and sing falsetto nursery rhymes. But speech in this form too was a diminishing skill, and another reason for Lucius to worry. Lucius pulled aside the sitting room curtain to see a woman pacing the footpath below. She hardly seemed a messenger of doom, but he was almost certain she was here because of the previous night's efforts. The rat on his shoulder squeaked approbation of their visitor, the sound barely recognizable as the words, "Fair maiden." "None of that, Magnus," Lucius admonished him. "I hardly think she's knocking on door to door for a beau." Magnus ran down Lucius's arm to the windowsill, then down the curtain to the floor, and a moment later his wiry human self stood in the rat's place. "Yet deny not the possibility," he said. "Love's whiskers," said Lucius. Magnus's long fingers felt his upper lip where ratty whiskers still sprung out. They vanished in a trice, and he continued with his observations. "Love's visitation cannot be foreseen, and if you start on about how I'm losing my youth and my looks and must marry while someone will still have me, Magnus, I'll hex you. We've other concerns today at any rate." The woman on Stephen Street rapped abruptly on the door and waited, back straight as a poker. Lucius could only see the top of her elegant hat, but he approved of her posture and the determined way she waited in answer to her summons. He'd give Magnus this much. He knew the kind of woman that Lucius found appealing. He stood by the fireplace and affected a commanding nonchalance, never an easy feat as a short, stocky man of middle age, born in East London, even if he had mostly shed the accent. Magnus, whose manners fluctuated between man and rat, stood on the carpet, alert and curious. They heard footsteps on the steps, and a moment later they made Emma open the door and bobbed a curtsy. "A visitor for you, sir. Miss Muriel Frisk, sir." "Tail!" snapped Lucius sharply, sotto voce. Magnus, with an alarmed look down at the tip of his pink tail still visible under the hem of his trousers, muttered, "Go to!" and it vanished just as their visitor was ushered into the parlour. The young lady was perhaps in her mid-20s and of resolute and regal bearing. She was taller than Lucius, with smooth brown skin, elegant gloved hands, a sensitive full mouth and dark clever eyes, and she was the most handsome woman Lucius had seen in a long time. Her curly black hair was piled high under her dark blue hat, and her penetrating eyes observed him and Magnus from under the brim. "Welcome, Miss Frisk. I'm Lucius Kearney, and this is my partner, Magnus Smith. Thank you, Emma. Some tea, please." Emma bobbed and departed, leaving Miss Frisk coolly assessing the men of the house. "You're not what I was expecting," said the lady at length, her accent revealing her American origins. New York, Lucius guessed, though he only ever recognized 3 American accents, east, west, south. "What were you expecting?" Magnus asked immediately, his blue eyes gleaming with interest. Miss Frisk, hands folded primly in front of her, replied, "Fortune-tellers are usually artistic older ladies wearing many scarves, too much lace, and redolent with the scent of roses and disrepute.